Hello guys! In this video, Cabilin, Villaverde, and I are going to talk about morphology. Just like phonology, morphology is also something that we look into whenever we study a language, particularly English. Now, just like phonology, there are also language patterns that morphology is concerned with. Before we begin, let me just go over the scope of our presentation. So I'm going to give a short discussion of the definition of morphology, and then Cabilin will follow through with the different morphological processes, and then Villaverde will continue with the different ways on how morphological units are classified, and then we'll end with a proper synthesis of everything. So let's begin. This is how morphology is defined technically. Morphology refers to the part of the grammar that is concerned with words and word formation. Now, like I said earlier, morphology and phonology are both sub-branches of linguistics. And the thing is, they are very interactive, meaning to say, there are many morphological processes that affect the phonology of a certain language. Later, we will show you or illustrate how it happens. The first person to have used the word or the term morphology was August Schleicher. He used it in his studies in the past, and this term actually had Greek origins. It's a combination of two words, morph, which means form or shape, and logy, which means study or account. Now, there are varying definitions of morphology, but we can just stick to this one. Simply put, morphology is the study of words. It's basically just the study of words. So, how do we define words? Words are independent. That's the first point. Words are independent. In what way are they independent? If you try to study the following sentences, you can see that the word bag actually appears in different locations in a sentence. So that's one proof that they are independent. They can exist anywhere, unlike phonemes, which have to exist with other sounds in order to become meaningful. Words, unlike phonemes, are very independent because they can stand on their own. They are meaningful on their own. They have their own definition. So, um, another definition of words is this. Words have internal structure. Let's take, for example, this word, anti-disestablishmentarianism. It's a very long word, but we can actually break this down into smaller units. Can you try to think of the actual number of units that we can divide this word into? You can count with me. Let's have the following: anti, and then this, and then the root word establish, that's the third, and then meant, that's the fourth, ari, that's the fifth, ayan, that's the sixth, and ism, that's the seventh. So there are 7 parts in this word, which only proves to show that words indeed have internal structure. The third point about words under the lens of morphology is this: words may or may not have inflection. Later in the report, you can see, or you may better understand inflections. But for the benefit of understanding this point, let me tell you what inflections are. Inflections are slight changes that you make or that words undergo. But these changes don't actually change the meaning or the essence of a certain words. They are just mere um, additions or changes in a certain word, but they don't change its meaning entirely. Okay, they only serve particular purposes, for example, grammatical purposes. To better understand, let's compare the following sets of sentences in English and in Spanish. So let me read. I have a red car and I have two red cars. Let's focus on the words car and cars. So in English, we inflect through adding the word s to a certain word, and it's called pluralization in English. Now, how do we pluralize? We add s to the existing noun from car to cars. That's the change. Now, let's turn our attention to the Spanish translation. Let me read. I'll try my best to read it in Spanish. So, tengo un coche rojo and tengo dos coches rojos. So, from the phrases coche rojo and coche rojos, you can see that there is also a pluralization going on. There's an inflection going on. And just like with English, the inflection is done by adding S. Okay? Here we can see that the words coche and rojo are both pluralized. Rojo means red and coche means car in English. Okay? The thing is, they are both right. I mean, they undergo the same processes of pluralization, but there is a slight difference between the two. In English, we only pluralize nouns like car and tree and chair. We all pluralize them by adding s or es. In Spanish, on the other hand, we pluralize not only nouns like coches, but also adjectives like the word red. Let's turn our attention to the next set. So we have in English, Sam is a lawyer and Katarina is a lawyer. Let's establish that Sam is actually a male and Katarina is a female. Now let's turn to the Spanish translation. Here we have Samuel es abogado and Katarina es abogada. In English, abogado is lawyer. Abogada is also lawyer. You can see that there is quite a change that is happening here, specifically in the Spanish translation. So, other than pluralization, gendering is also a way to inflect certain words. For example, abogado is masculine because Sam is a male, and abogada is feminine because Katarina is a female. Okay, now what change happened here? If it's masculine, the words, specifically nouns in Spanish, may end in O, abogado in this case. And for the feminine counterpart, we have A, abogada. Abogado is masculine and abogada is feminine. I think this is something that the Filipino language borrowed from the Spanish language, because we also have gendered nouns in Filipino. Okay, I guess there are also words. There are also words in English that are gendered. For example, the words host and hostess, and the words actor and actress. So they are gendered, but they are not common in the English language. In Spanish, almost all of their um, nouns, especially occupational nouns, are gendered. Okay, so let me just give a short recap of what we have um, studied here. So morphology is the study of words, and under the lens of morphology, we say that words are independent, words have internal structure, and words may or may not have inflections. To discuss the different morphological processes involved in a language, let's listen to Cabilin's part of this presentation.
Good morning, everyone. So, roughly 3 weeks ago, while I was preparing the slides for my presentation, I encountered the word Google What. So, I searched about it, and Google said that it's a Google search term, Google search query, wherein you have to think of two obscure and unrelated words and search them on Google. Um, and when you get a solitary web page or just one Google search result, then you just encounter the Google What. So I shared about this word because it is actually an interesting example of a compound word, um, which is thanks to compounding. And compounding, we know that is one of the processes in manufacturing words, which is at the very core of morphology, which is my group's report. But now let's have the word formation processes. First, those processes that are related to inflection. First is internal change. So it's a process that substitutes one non-morphemic segment for another non-morphemic segment in order to mark a grammatical contrast. And the contrast that it marks is from present to past. And as we can see, in the example, we have the sing to sung. So the internal change is from vowel E to A. And it also marks a grammatical contrast from being singular to plural, like in the example, goose to geese. So we have the internal change double O and the double E. But we can further categorize these internal changes into two. First is the ablaut. This one is more unconditioned, and we can see that it has an alternation from E to A, and the grammatical contrast that it marks is from present to past, as in the following examples: sing to sung, sink to sunk, drive to drove. Next kind of internal change is the umlaut. This is something that is distinct to Germanic languages such as English, and this one is more conditioned. As it said here, it reflects phonologically conditioned alterations from an earlier stage in the language's history. So what? So it's from singular to plural, as in the following examples: foot to feet, goose to geese. So the internal change is from double O to double E. So to further explain, in old so the old English version of the modern English goose is goss, and for plural, we have the during the time we have the plural suffix e. So that's why we have the gossy. And then subsequent development included the loss of these plural suffix e and the unrounding of the rounded vowels. That's why we get now the plural guess. So um, further developments also involve the raising of the mid vowels u and e, o and e rather. That's why we get now the modern English goose and geese. So that's from mid vowel o to high vowel u, And for plural, we have the mid vowel e to high vowel e. So we now have goose and geese. Next process that is related to an inflection is suppletion. So it replaces a morpheme with an entirely different morpheme to indicate the grammatical contrast. So in the examples that we have from the present go to past went. We also have the present be to past was and where. So as we can see, um, it's a totally different morpheme. We cannot see remnants of the present form of the verb. But we have here the case of think and sick, because the past of think is thought and the past tense or form of sick is soft. So the question is it a suppletion or internal change? So the answer is it is an intense form of internal change and also a case of a partial suppletion. It is an intense form of internal change because we can see that it's not just a change of a single vowel to another single vowel, but instead we can see that from in it changes to ough, and from vowel e in the next example it changes to ough as well. So it's not just an internal change, but an intense form of internal change, and it's not a complete or a full suppletion. It's just a partial suppletion rather, because we can still see remnants of the present tense form of the verbs. For example, we can still see th from think in its past tense form, which is thought. We can still see the s from sick in its new form, soft. Now let's proceed to reduplication. So it's a process which marks a grammatical or semantic contrast by repeating all or part of the base to which it applies. So we have first the full reduplication. So what we do here is we just repeat the entire base of the word. We have Turkish examples, güzel, it means beautifully. But if you repeat the base güzel, we now have güzel güzel with a new definition, very beautifully. Kabuk, quickly, and kabuk kabuk, very quickly. If it's E, well, if you double it, then you have EU, which means now very well. We also have Indonesian examples like orang, it means man. But if you double it, then you have orang-orang, which means men. So it becomes plural. Anak is child, but if it's anak-anak, we have children. Mangga means mango, but if it's tu manga, like manga manga, it means mangoes. For partial reduplication, this is something that is um, prominent and more predominant to Asian languages such as Tagalog. What happens in partial reduplication is that we only copy the part of the base. And in this example, it's the first vowel to a consonant to vowel sequence rather than the entire word. For example, we get the first consonant to vowel sequence in the word Tagalog word takbos, and that's TA. So we now have tatakbo. So from takbo, which means run, we get now the tatakbo, which means will run, as well as lakad, which means walk, lalakad, will walk, pili, choose, pipili, will choose. Finally, we have the tone placement. So it makes the distinction between past and future tense, and this is something that can be observed in Monobili language that is spoken in Congo. So for the past tense words, we have the da, zi, and wo. So we can see an acute accent. So it's rising. So for da, it's spanked, and for its future version, it has a grave accent, the one that is falling. So it's da. It means will spank. It is in the future tense. So we also have Z, which means eight, and its future counterpart would be Z with the grave accent, which means will eat, and also wo, which means killed, and we also have its future form wo, which means will kill. Now let's have the other processes that are not related to inflection. First is cliticization. So it's a process of attaching dependent morphemes or bound morphemes to the preceding word. So we have here examples: I'm, Mary's, and there. So which are the host in this example? So first, let's have the definition of host. Um, this um, these are where a clitic is attached. So in examples, the hosts are I, Mary, and they. While clitic, these are the dependent morphemes, um, which are attached to the host. So they always require or they always need a host. So from the examples, the clitics are the apostrophe M, the apostrophe S, and apostrophe RE. So we have two types of clitics. First is the proclitics. Um, these are attached to the beginning of their host, as in the French example. So Jean time, its English translation is John you likes. So the clitic here is the T in French, which means you in English. So you attach it at the beginning of the host, which is aime or likes. So in the English modern translation, we have the John likes you. So this is the case. This is an example of a proclitic, while the enclitics is these are um, clitics that we attach to the end of the word, and this are prominent to the English language. Next is conversion. So it's a process that assigns an already existing word to a new syntactic category. So we have words that already have an established meanings, or they already belong to a certain part of speech, and then we use them into different contexts. We use them with different meanings and with new um, categories or parts of speech. So for example, we have here verbs that are derived from nouns. So originally, ink, butter, and sheep, they are nouns, but we can use them now as verbs. So ink, a contract, so you have to include a clause or a phrase rather. So ink, a contract. So butter, the bread. Shift, the package. So they now function as verbs. We also have nouns derived from verbs. So we have the run, drink, and drive. So originally they are verbs, but now they can be used as nouns, like a long run, a hot drink, a pleasant drive. We also have verbs derived from adjectives. So that's empty the box, dirty a shirt, and better the old score. Next is clipping. So what we do here is that we shorten polysyllabic words by deleting or omitting one or more syllables. This process very this is something that is employed when we shorten the names of um, our friends or people. So for example, we have Liz. It's from Elizabeth. We have Ron from Aaron, Rob from Robert, and Sue from Susan. So here are some examples. So zoo is from zoological garden, fax is from facsimile, fan is from fanatic, flu is from influenza, van is from caravan, mob is from mobile, vulgus, prof is from professor, doc is from doctor, psych is from psychology, burger is from hamburger, and we have a lot of more examples. So here are some examples of clips that are accepted in general usage, like app from application, shortened form of application, ad from advertisement, auto from um, automobile or automatic, so lab from laboratory, sub from subway, deli from delicatessen. So we also have porn, demo, and condo. An interesting recent clip is actually the blog from weblog. So it's a noun. And then from clipping, we now have the verb to blog about, which is actually an example of conversion. And from the verb to blog about, we now get blogger, which is a noun, again, through the process of conversion. So blending. So we create words from non-morphemic parts of two already existing items. So usually it's the first part of one and the final part of the other. So that's why we have here bit. We get the B from binary and it from digit. So pixel, it's from picture plus element. Quasar from quasi and stellar. Chortle is from chuckle and snort. And spam is from spiced and ham. So the older and more familiar examples that we have are brunch from breakfast and lunch, smog from smoke and fog, motel from motor and hotel, telethon from telephone and marathon, and channel from channel and tunnel. While some recent innovations, which we can hear from millennials, are staycation. It's from stay and vacation. We have froyo, frozen in yogurt, Wi-Fi from wireless and hi-fi, romance from brother and romance, and emoticon from emotion and icon. But we also have the strongly syllable-oriented blends um, that is common in Asian languages. So not just two, but more than two words contribute to a syllable to form a blend. So for example, in Tagalog, we have uh, all the silog ending word for food. So like for example, tapsilog. So that's from tapa, sinangag, and itlog. We also have long silog, chick silog, tosilog, bang silog, corn silog, hot silog, pork silog, and sisig silog, and many more. We also have an example from Malay. So we have the pulada. Pu is from pusat, la is from latihan, and da is from darat. So its translation is center training army or a army training camp. It's also used for crossbred animals. So liger and tigon is actually from lion and tiger. So zidonk and zonkey from zebra and donkey. Well, kama is from camel and llama, and growler or paisley is from grizzly and polar bear. Also, in our Philippine love teams or tandems, we employ this process. For example, we have Katniel, so it's from Katrine and Danielle, Lizken, Jaylene, Donchard, Joa Pao, and a lot more. Next is the process so-called back formation. So it's a process that creates a new word by removing a real or supposed affix from another in the language. So um, for examples, we have the resurrect from resurrection, enthuse from enthusiasm, donate from donation, and self-destruct from self-destruction. So accordingly, the older word or the ones being the ones given birth first or the ones existed first are the longer words, which are resurrection, enthusiasm, donation, and self-destruction, and they are nouns. So through the process of reanalysis, so their suffixes were removed, and then the verbs are formed, like resurrect, enthuse, donate, and self-destruct. So actually, one example of a back formation um, created out of a wrong assumption. So is the word P from peace. So maybe people before they tend to think that because um, all our nouns, plural nouns, they end with s or es. So maybe the singular form of peace is p. So we just have to remove s, the suffix s. So some examples of back formation. So that's editor, peddler, and swindler. So they are from no. So they are the original words, but with the help of reanalysis, so we remove or, er, and er as well. So they are suffixes. They are removed from the original words. Then we get the verbs formed by back formation. So we have edit, peddle, and swindle. Now let's have initialisms. So it's a process wherein you get the first letters of the words, and then you form a new word. So we can divide this into two. We have the acronyms and alphabetisms. So for acronyms, you get the initial letters of some or all of the words in a phrase or title, and then you pronounce them as one word, as a single word. We have a lot of examples like UNICEF, UNESCO, AIDS, NATO, NASA, YOLO, FOMO, NISMED, Mag-asa, DepEd, SCUBA, LASER, um, Radar, MOA, ASEAN, CAL, and CHED. Well, for alphabetism, you also get the initial letters of the words, but you don't pronounce it as a single word, but rather as a series of letters like UP, AS, OUR, CRS, CSSD, CHK, STS, STD, HIV, DOST, DOH, USD, BVD, BGC, SMDC, GMA, ABS, CBS, ABS, CBN, DDS, QC, and a lot more examples. But we actually have an intermediate case. For example, the CD-ROM. So it is a compound which consists of the alphabetism CD because you pronounce it as separate letters. It means compact disk. And you also have the acronym ROM, so you pronounce it as a single word, which means read-only memory. So it's um, alphabetism plus acronym. And this is also true for the word NC PAG. So NC is an example of alphabetism. You pronounce it as separate letters, and PAG you pronounce it as one word, which is an acronym. So next we have the onomatopoeia. Onomatopoeia. So um, some words, these are the words that have been created to sound like the things that they name. So like buzz, hiss, sizzle, and cuckoo. So so we have here the sounds in English like cock-a-doodle-doo, but in Japanese it's koke koko. In Tagalog it's tiklao. We have the meow in English, the sound of cat, but in Japanese it's nia. We also have the meow meow in Tagalog. Chirp is is the English sound of the bird, but in Japanese it's pi pi, while tiririt in Tagalog. Bow wow is the sound of a dog in English. It's one in Japanese and ow wow in Tagalog.
Hi. So John Edmer discussed the first processes in forming new words, and I will be talking about the last one, which is compounding. So compounding is another word formation process, which is actually very common to us because we have studied this since our elementary and high school days. So um, to define compounding, it is the combination of at least two existing words to form a new word, written as single words with a hyphen or as separate words. And when we compound words, we can actually form nouns, verbs, or adjectives. The first one is the noun compounds. So simply put, we can form nouns by adding a noun and the noun together, or by putting an adjective and a noun, a verb followed by a noun, and a preposition and noun. So to give us a few examples, we have the word fire engine, which is a combination of two nouns. We can also think of the words airline, birthday, sunflower, friendship, and so on and so forth. So I think this is actually one of the most common ways of forming compound words, nouns and nouns together. But then we also have the adjective and the noun, like greenhouse, a blackboard, a gentleman, and highway. For the verb and noun, we have jumpsuit, a comeback, breakfast, countdown, and chopstick. Lastly is the preposition followed by a noun like in-laws, overdue, and onset. Then we have the verb compounds. So take note that we can still use different parts of speech and put them together to form the verb compounds, like a noun and verb, spoon feed, or brain wash, house hunt, and babysit. Next, we have adjective and verb like dry clean or whitewash. For the preposition and verb, we can say overlook. Another example is intake. And then for verb and verb, we have break dance or stir fry. So after we combine these two separate words, we form a word in the shape of a verb. Lastly is the adjective compounds, which we can form by putting a noun and an adjective together, an adjective and another adjective, and a preposition followed by an adjective, just like the words nationwide, red hot, and overripe. Now, actually, when we put an adjective and a noun together, when we make an adjective noun compound, we can characterize them by the more prominent stress on their first component. So, see, if we put an adjective and a noun together, just like the word greenhouse, normally the stress will be in the first syllable or the first word, which is the adjective. So we say greenhouse, which means it's a glass enclosed garden. But for non-compound words, meaning two separate words, the second element or the noun is the one that is stressed, like a green house, which means a house painted green. And then going back to the compound word, we can say a blackboard, which means a chalkboard. So in that word, the stress is in the adjective black. On the other hand, if we will talk about the non-compound expression, we will say it's a blackboard, which is literally a board that is black. Now, these are some of the new compounds that are added to the dictionaries. We have the word buzzworthy, which means likely to arouse public interest. Digital detox, it's refraining from using electronic device. And space tourism, which is to travel to space for recreational purposes. So take note of the last two new compounds that we form them as two separate words. We do not put the words together or we do not use a hyphen, and that's also possible. So after we form these compound words, we can classify them into two. One is the endocentric compounds, which are words that have meanings that can be guessed by combining the meaning of their components. The head is specified by the elements to the left. So in endocentric compounds, we have what we call a head word that carries the meaning of the compound word, just like the example, dog food. So as the name suggests, we can identify that we are talking about a food for dogs. And then a cave man, it's about a man who lives in a cave. And then sky blue. The color blue is similar to the color of the sky. So the head word carries the meaning of the compound word, and the linguistic function of the compound word remains the same. So other examples of this are newspaper, a paper about the news, textbook, classroom, handbag, and bookstore. So we easily understand the meaning of the word by looking at the head word alone. The other classification for compounds is called exocentric compounds, which are words that have meanings that cannot be guessed by combining the meaning of their component. So here, we do not take the words literally because they mean differently from the combined words alone. The meaning of the word is also not carried by the head. For example, is red neck. We are not literally talking about a neck, which is color red, just like a hot dog is not literally a dog that is hot. So the meaning cannot be guessed by the words alone. Just like the example, red head also, and a scarecrow. So they have different meanings. Now, aside from compounding, we have other sources of words. Okay, just like the Number one, word manufacture or coinage. When we say word manufacture or coinage, these are the words that are invented either deliberately or accidentally. Mostly, there's no basis for the formation of these words, such as, again, redneck, hot dog, and even the word escalator. You just deliberately make up the word. The second one is eponyms. When we talk about eponyms, these are words that are taken from or named after the person who discovered it, just like what, Fahrenheit, and boycott. So you see, actually, these are surnames of the people who invented it. And other examples of eponyms are leotard, which came from the inventor's name Jules Leotard. We have guillotine, Alzheimer's, Newton, diesel, and even cardigan. We take those words from the surnames of the people who invented them. The third um the third way is through brand names that suddenly become accepted as generic terms. So this is very common here in the Philippines also when we say Kleenex instead of referring to the facial tissue, Xerox instead of photocopy, and another very common word that we use is when we say we have to Google it, which is actually a brand name. We say it instead of saying we will conduct an internet search. There are a lot of brand names that are accepted as generic terms, which may be unfamiliar to us that they came from brand names. Just like hula hoop, it's a brand name for a toy. Styro, taser, post it, even band aid. And then we have Tupperware, Scotch tape, popsicle, chapstick, jacuzzi, even bubble wrap, jet ski, and of course, Pampers and Colgate. The last one is borrowing, which means we literally borrow a word from another language and use it in the English language, just like latte from Italian, feng shui for Chinese, algebra from Arabic, murder, which is a word that came from French, and yo-yo, a Philippine toy that is now accepted in the English language. Okay, so that's the last of the word formation processes when talking about morphology. We will now move to the free and bound morphemes. We need to define first what a morpheme is. It is the minimal unit of a word, or we can also say it's the smallest meaningful unit of a word. It has a grammatical function and it can be either free or bound. Okay, so let's take this word for example. Unhappiness. So as you can see, the word is divided into three, which means there are three morphemes in the word unhappiness. We have the prefix un, that's one morpheme, happy, or the root, and the suffix ness. So it's composed of three morphemes. Now our morphemes can be either free or bound. When we say free morpheme, it can occur on its own as a word, just like happy. Happy on its own has its own meaning. Okay? It may develop into other words depending on the bound morpheme being attached to it. So if we add the bound morpheme un to happy, we will have an adjective, unhappy, which means not happy. But if we add the word ness to mean unhappiness, then we will have a noun, which all have or which all use the root word happy. So I repeat, a free morpheme is a morpheme that can occur on its own as a word. Next is the bound morpheme, just like un and ness. So you see, these are the affixes that we use, or the prefixes and suffixes. It can only occur as part of a word. The bound morpheme cannot stand alone because it will not have a complete meaning. It must be attached to a word to become meaningful. Okay, so this bound morpheme includes all of the prefixes, the suffixes, and s, ed, en, and ing. Without a free morpheme, they will not have meaning, or they will not become meaningful. So let's try to identify the free and the bound morphemes in these words. So remember, a free morpheme can stand on its own, while a bound morpheme has to be attached to a word in order to become meaningful. So for the word kissed, our free morpheme here is the word kiss. And then we add the bound morpheme ed. For freedom, the free morpheme is free and the bound morpheme is dumb. Stronger uses the free morpheme strong added with the bound morpheme er. Now for follow and awe, these are actually just free morphemes. So we did not put any bound morpheme with them. Goodness uses the free morpheme good. Talkative has talk as its free morpheme, and teacher has the free morpheme teach. So the rest are bound morphemes. So take note, when we only use one free morpheme, we will identify the word as a simple word. Okay, because simple words have only one free morpheme. Compound words have two free morphemes, just like what we have discussed a while ago in compounding. Lastly, we will have complex words when there is at least one free morpheme and at least one bound morpheme. Okay, so simple words have one free morpheme. Compound words have two free morphemes, as discussed a while ago. And complex words have at least one free and at least one bound morpheme. Again, let's try to identify if the words here are simple, compound, or complex. 1. Irresistible. This is a complex word because we have the prefix ir, the free morpheme resist, and then ibol. So there are two bound morphemes in this word, making it a complex word. Next is hardcore. We have two words here that are joined together without the use of a bound morpheme. So this is a compound word. Number 3 is imperative. Imperative. So this actually seems like a complex word, but it's not. It's simple because there's no root word here, and we did not just add the prefix im or tim. This is a simple word. Number 4 is assignment. We have the free morpheme assign and the bound morpheme meant. So this is a complex word. Geography. Geography is another simple word. Facebook. We put the words face and book together, making a compound word. Skyrocketing. These are composed of three morphemes: sky, rocket, and then ing. So it's complex. Dislike is a complex word also because of the prefix dis and the free morpheme like, which is different from number 9. In the word disgust, this is just a simple word because um, gust is not a free morpheme here. And this is not just an additional prefix. It's one word that can stand on its own. Legalize and realize are both complex morphemes because we use the suffix "ize" or "ize" added to the free morphemes legal and real. Wanted is also complex because of the free morpheme want and the ed, additional ed. Lastly, hatred is a simple word. Okay, so those are examples of simple, compound, and complex words. So here's another note. A sequence of words does not always constitute a morpheme. Like what we mentioned a while ago, this is a prefix that we added to the word like. So we came up or we ended with a complex word, dislike. But it's different from disgust, which is just a simple word. Okay, we can't separate this and gust in this example. The same goes with the free morpheme odd followed by ity, okay, to form the word oddity. This is a complex word different from pity because pity is just a simple word. We can separate the p from the ity. So a sequence of words does not always constitute a morpheme. Another note is there are words in English with units that are neither free nor bound, just like sieve. This is very common. This is often used in English words such as receive and conceive. But sieve is actually not a word. It's just a unit that is neither free nor bound. Okay? Again, we use receive, conceive, but if we separate them, they don't have or they won't have a meaning of their own. Then, um, Jet will discuss the lexical and functional morphemes.
Hi guys, it's me again. So Villaverde has already talked to you about the two ways on how we can classify morphemes. This is the third part, and this part categorizes bound morphemes. We call the two categories of bound morphemes as derivational and inflectional morphemes. Let's start by differentiating derivational morphemes and inflectional morphemes. In the English language, particularly, derivational morphemes can either be a suffix, such as the suffix ness, spelled as ness, from the word happiness, Or it can be a prefix, such as the word, not the word, but the prefix un, from the word unhappy. On the other hand, inflectional morphemes are all suffixes, such as the plural inflection s from words like cars, trees, and chairs. All right. Another way to differentiate them is by understanding their origin. So derivational morphemes are mainly adopted from other languages such as Latin and Greek and many others, while inflectional morphemes are all native to English. So they later, compared to derivational morphemes, inflectional morphemes developed much later than the derivational morphemes. Okay, so the third point is this: derivational morphemes are added to create a separate word. So this part tells us the function of derivational morphemes. The function is to derive another word, an entirely different word from the originated word. So for example, um, we have the word happy. If we add the suffix ness to happy, we get happiness. Happy and happiness are different words. They are related, but they are different words. They exist in two different entries in the dictionary. They are separate from each other. Although they belong to the same word class, they are both nouns. Derivational morphemes may also change the word class of a certain word. For example, um, let's have the word um, create. Create is a verb. If we add the suffix ion, we get creation. The suffix ion changed the word class of the verb create. From verb, it became a noun. Creation is a noun. All right. So how is this different from inflectional morphemes? Like I said earlier in the beginning of this presentation, inflectional morphemes are only added for the sake of grammaticality. Okay. So earlier I explained how the inflection S can pluralize certain words such as cars, trees, and chairs. This is the last thing about derivational morphemes and inflectional morphemes. Derivational morphemes have an indefinite number. Okay. There are many noun-forming morphemes, adjective-forming morphemes, verb-forming morphemes, while inflectional morphemes only has 8 in the English language. Mind you that these derivational morphemes and inflectional morphemes um, may be similar to other languages as well. All right, so let's look at some examples. Here are some examples of derivational morphemes. Those in the pink box are actually adjective forming morphemes. I'm sure you can add more to this. Those in the triangle are verb forming morphemes. Later, we will show you some examples. They are verb forming morphemes. Those in the circle are actually noun v- noun forming morphemes. And in English, we have the suffix "ly" to derive adverbs. This the examples in this slide are quite limited. Like I said, there is an indefinite number of derivational morphemes. Let's move to the inflectional morphemes. Like I said, there are only 8 of them. So for nouns, we have the plural verb. I know the plural s or es to pluralize the nouns. And for noun phrases, we have the genitive or the possessive apostrophe s, such as the bird's song. For adjectives, we have the comparative er and the superlative est for faster and fastest. For verbs, we have 4 different inflections. We use the inflection s to refer to third person singular present tense, such as proves, creates, makes. And then we have ed, the inflection ed, or sometimes d or t, to refer to inflect the words in their past tense. For example, we have proved or created. And then we use the inflection ing for progressive and present participle forms of the verb, like in this case, is proving. And then the eighth inflectional morpheme is the en, all right, and they um they can be used to change words into their past participle form, as in has proven or was proven. From the word prove, from the basic form prove, we add en to make or to change it to its past participle. All right. Some things to remember. The morpheme of an inflectional morpheme or derivational morpheme attaches to is called root. So the root word in the word antis is tie. And we connected two morphemes to it, the adjective forming un or un and the inflection s, the present tense inflection s. And then for this adjective, oldest, of course, the root is old, and we have superlative, uh, the superlative inflectional morpheme est. Let's have a short exercise. Let's try to find the root among the morphemes here. What do you think is the root of the word colonialism? Yes, that's colony. Colony. And then it underwent morphological changes, of course. We added morphemes al and ism. For number 2, we have the root word. You're right, it's decipher. We added morphemes in, able, and ity. So three derivational morphemes are added to this word to form indecipherability, to the root word decipher to form indecipherability. And then we have um, the root just for unjustification. Let's try to count the derivational morphemes here. We have un, ify, the verb forming suffix ify, ify, and we have um, icate, also a verb forming morpheme, and we have the noun forming morpheme ION. So there are four derivations that happened here. Okay. For number four, we have the root reverse. The derivations are ear and IBLE. Okay. More notes on this classification of morphemes. Derivational morphology is not limited to affixing. Affixing is the general term for adding prefixes, suffixes, and others. This morphological process may also be audible. Sometimes it's not visible. The morphological change is not visible to us, but we can hear them. Like in this case, we we have the word permit and permit. So the word permit, the stress is in the first syllable, is a noun. If we want to use its verb equivalent, we change the stress, or we move the stress to the next syllable, to the second syllable. We say permit. So permit is a noun and permit is a verb. Another example of a morphological change in a word. From noun to verb, we have extract for the noun, and we have the word extract for the verb. Can you hear the difference in stress? And can you understand the change in meaning? That's an example of how phonology and morphology are actually very connected to one another. More notes on this. In some instances, only a feature of the final consonant changes, usually its voicing. So, from advice to advise, from belief to believe, from breath to breathe. So the final consonant sound changes from s to z. Okay. In the other example, from f to v. In the third example, from th to the, from soft th to hard th. Okay. More notes. Moreover, adding a derivational affix requires a change in the stress pattern, with consequential changes in the pronunciations of the vowels. Like in this case, if you try to add a morpheme to the words churor and regal, the stress changes. Sorry, the slide shows something wrong. The stress should be moved here from to the second syllable. All right, so from churor to tutorial. So the change in stress moved from the stress moved from the first syllable chu to the second syllable chore. Another example, we have regal, stress is in the first syllable, but for this word regalia, the stress is in the second syllable. Okay. Another thing that we can also learn from this presentation is this. Because of its long and complex history, English, just like all languages, has many irregularities. Like in this case, we don't inflect uh, the word sheep anymore when we want to pluralize them. The singular sheep and the plural sheep are also are are are, are the same in form. Also, another inconsistency, we have alumna to alumnae. Okay, instead of pluralizing by adding s, we added e. And then for man, we pluralize by changing the vowel to e, from man to men, woman to women. And then for this example of a verb, we call we call it an irregular verb. We have ring, rang, and rung. Okay. For the past tense form of this verb, we don't add the standard inflection ed, and for the past participle of this verb, we don't add the standard inflection for past participles en. Okay, and this is also a special case. We don't use the comparatives and the superlatives here. We just say the comparative form of good is better, an entirely different word in terms of spelling. And also we have the superlative best for good. That's all right. So how can we synthesize this report? I think the biggest takeaway that you can get from our presentation is the fact that all the information and all the insights that you have learned from this report is not only applicable to the English language, they are also true with other languages. And maybe if we want to learn or study a particular language, whatever that may be, we can learn. We can try to recall our learnings from the morphology of the English language in order to learn another language. And that's the end of our presentation. Thank you so much.